deep inside of me, where the sky meets and the sea. Heartbeats blend with oceans roar, seeking depth I can't ignore. Shells and sand beneath my toes, tides reveal what ebb and flows. In the quiet still I hear whispered longings crystal clear. Deep calls to deep inside of me, where the sky meets and the sea. Heartbeats blend with oceans roar, seeking depth I can't ignore. Shows and mirror, soul's desire, burning with a holy fire. Depth of love beyond all dreams, in the vastness it redeems.
All right. Hey, everybody. It's been a hot minute since we've got to do this, and I think I'm glitching again. Hopefully, things will unglitch themselves. Our neighborhood has been a little slaggy and underwater internet wise, so we'll see the best. We'll do the best we can here. Hopefully, this is going to work. So, looks like I'm frozen. We might need to restart this.
You're not frozen
Everything- oh,
presently.
good?
I
Okay.
can see you.
Okay, because you're
I don't know if
frozen
I'm
on my end.
frozen.
You're
I hope
frozen on
I'm
my
not
end.
frozen.
I was like, but I think it's probably, I don't know, it might be me. I don't know. Anyway, been a while since we've had a chance to do something, and I finished my thesis chapter 4 on Friday, and I'm like, I'm going to take a couple of days of a break before I have to jump back in and turn the thing in on Saturday and do something fun. And who better than to have a very deep, meandering conversation with and my buddy here, Josh Davidson. So I reached out to him and I was like, Josh, I got this great idea. Let's do this. And he's like, what are we talking about? I'm like, well, I don't know. We'll figure it out. So it's going to be really fun, I think. But those are all usually our best conversations when we throw things out and just chill. So I got this idea. I was watching several places, because as your thesis writing, you're forced to be extremely precise and technical. And so you have to explain every time you use a word that's not the way that normal humans would use that word. So you have to do a lot of definition of terms and using a lot of really long, fancy, pedantic words that don't really actually mean anything to explain stuff that really is not very relevant to anybody that really cares, because it's just a lot of letters in a row. And I was getting frustrated with that. And then I was watching Will Hess the other day on Trinity Radio doing one of those call-in debate me. And he was talking about atonement and penal substitutionary atonement. And as I was watching that, I was getting frustrated because I was like, can somebody please define a term here? Because you guys are throwing around words like wrath and, mercy and grace, and nobody's defining what any of these words mean. And so you all are disagreeing about something that you don't even agree on, because nobody is defining what they're talking about. So I thought, who better to have a conversation about how words are actually meaningless than the storyteller himself, Mr. Josh Davidson. I'm like, this conversation is screaming out for Josh Davidson for this. Like, this is the perfect conversation.
Oh man, you know what's funny too is as a I think a good segue and starting point for this is just to say that I think words became more meaningless as we began to treat them as less symbolic themselves. We think that words actually contain data. Words are a stand-in for something. Words are a symbol. And our language, English, is particularly irritating because our letters don't mean anything. They are just signifiers of sounds and phonemes. And so the words that we have are oftentimes, most of our English vocabulary was acquired by rifling through the pockets of other languages, and kind of like picking from other things, and we made this weird hodgepodge Franken language is what English ended up becoming, right? And it has a
Mhm.
lot of development. It has a lot of specificity. It's cool because we can be very precise in a way if our terms are clear, right? But because of that assumption that our terms are clear, simply because we can be technical about them, is something
Mhm.
that gets us into a load of trouble, especially when we're talking about something as complex as, the basis for reality or theology or something of like,
Mhm.
it's like we often use these really silly phrases like it's clearly this or it is obviously that in a situation or a subject that's been hotly debated for centuries.
Mhm.
If it was clearly this or obviously that, it would be
Yep.
much more similar to how we agree about sneezes, right? Like we all know what a sneeze is. Like it's not really a shocker, right? We know what it feels like to stub your pinky toe, right? Like that's agreed
Mhm.
upon. That's pretty simple. I don't have to define that for you unless you haven't had the privilege of smashing your pinky toe into your bed frame at night, right? Like there are things that we have these universal experiences that we can agree upon and how to map them. But when I try to describe the experience to you, I could do it well, or I could do it poorly, or you could just have a different way of thinking about your body and your experiences that make what I'm describing unsuitable for you, even if we had that shared experience. And so, yeah, words get in their own way all the
Mhm.
time.
Yeah, it was actually yesterday, or was it the day before? I think it was yesterday. Dave was proofreading chapter 4 for me. And I was like, "How's it going?" He's like, "I don't understand any of this, but it's brilliantly written." And I was like, "I thank you." Okay. And after he got done reading all that, and then for some weird reason, he was watching something on, I don't even know what, because I wasn't paying attention. And he just looks at me and he goes, "Why does German sound so angry?" And I just started cracking up laughing really, really hard. And he's like, "What is so funny about that?" And I said, "You realize that most Protestant theology is
Oh,
based in either German or French." And he's
yeah.
just like, "Oh, that makes a whole lot of sense there about that." And I was just, as I was thinking about that some more, and I was like, okay. And then the other day, I don't know, maybe it was last week, I've lost all track of time. You were poking me on Facebook about literally, because I'm like, this, can we talk about the word that I hate the most in just about any language there is this word literally and literal. Like this
Oh my
word
goodness.
needs to be burned out of existence. I actually, this is one of the few things in life I hate is this word.
Well, I think
And
it makes your point well though, doesn't it?
it
Like that
does.
word, when that word had meaning, amen.
Mhm.
When that word had
Yep.
meaning, it meant something like technically or by the book.
Uh-huh.
Literally would have been a reference to the literature on the matter, so to speak.
Mhm.
Right? So when we say things like literally, and what we mean is physically, right? Or when we say literally, and what we mean is truthfully, or when we say literally, and what we mean is scientifically, or heaven forbid, when we say literally, and what we actually mean is figuratively, the actual opposite of every implication of the normative use of that word. Yeah, it's pretty hilarious that it's gone full scope. It means even its opposite. That's real
Uh-huh.
meaninglessness right there.
Mhm.
Like, yeah,
Exactly.
holy moly.
Yes, I actually had a seminary professor who said, "I am taking 5 points off your grade every time you use that word." And because it has turned into such a dumpster fire of a word that means absolutely nothing. Because people, one of my favorites is like, "Well, the Hebrew literally says," and I'm like, "You just said right there, you don't understand Hebrew, because Hebrew literally says very little. Actually, Hebrew is like, does its own thing and decides what it wants to do when it wants to do it and ignores the rules. So, literally isn't much of a thing in Hebrew. It can when it wants to, but most of the time it doesn't. And it's just like, when people are like, "Well, literally this," and I'm just like, "Well, actually, you mean figuratively this?" Because if you literally meant that, like, none of us, like,
I literally blew off my finger. That's still
right?
here.
I try.
Literally. It's literally right here. Oh my goodness.
I'm just like, like I was listening to something the other day. I don't remember where I ran into it, but it was like, most of us don't literally want to get, to have God give us what we deserve, because all of us deserve like terrible things. So, like, you literally don't want to get God to give you what you deserve. Like, this is not a prosperity gospel thing where you get like life is good in fairyland. Like, if we literally got what we deserved, we would probably all wind up, in hell crying for mercy. So, like, these are the kinds of things where you have to be very careful with using terms like that, because there is very little in I could say I'm literally after this going to go get in my car, and that might be true, but it might not. I don't know. I haven't decided what I'm doing after this, but it causes a lot of confusion, Josh. I think if I'm trying to express something that is deeply personal to me, and I want you to be as moved as I am, and it's not something that hits and resonates with you. And so it's like, then that causes me to be hurt, because Josh, why don't you love that and get as excited about what I just said as I did? And then I'm just like, well, obviously he literally doesn't understand what I said. Then I have to go through and re-explain it 7 times. And it's just like, you know, what in the world is going on? And it can cause injury and offense, and a lot of, misunderstanding between people in that case. I don't know if I'm the one who's frozen or if it's Josh who's frozen, or both of us.
You're still
But
not frozen.
okay.
Even if you look frozen, I
Okay.
can still hear and see you. So I hope
Okay.
the audience can.
Okay.
But you're good. You're good.
Okay.
But
I just
I think it's probably something where there's easy identifiers for this problem. Like if somebody's
Mhm.
watching this later and doesn't quite understand what we're pointing out, there are qualifiers to this problem and things that you like, examples of this that you can see pretty regularly, right? You can see it if you participate in any way in the let's say theological discussion world, the apologetics world. If you participate in that world at all, you see loads of examples of people using the same vocabulary but meaning something terribly different than one another, and not going through the trouble to articulate what their shorthand actually means. Instead of using particular language, they're using what I like to call Christianese, which are just our favorite Bible buzzwords that we can use as shorthands for what we actually mean theologically. We're having these really dense conversations, right? And as we're having them, we feel the inconvenience of having to use a paragraph of language when you could use 1 or 2 words that describe that paragraph of language. But if you don't ever go through that paragraph of language and are unwilling to come back to it to articulate it again if you need to, then you're going to have nothing but issues continually establishing agreement on anything, or even understanding on anything. Even if there's disagreement, the disagreement might end up looking like swinging your machetes wildly in the jungle instead of having a pointed conversation about the thing you're actually talking about, because neither of you can hear what you're meaning, because you're just hearing what you're saying, right? And sometimes we honestly, and we can see it outside of the debate world, if you wanted to, easily in the marital life. Anybody that's watching this who's an adult, who has a husband or a wife, heaven forbid, you think that you understand them every time they're speaking. And then later you realize that you didn't understand anything that they said. You didn't understand, right? Or you didn't remember. Heaven forbid you have a terrible memory, or you're distracted for but a moment to hear the most important detail of a long list of information, right? Like there's lots of ways that these things we get lost in translation, right? Because it's not actually that easy to give you a glimpse of what's going on in this thing. Inside here, it's not easy to give you a glimpse of what's going on inside here, right? It's hard to get what's in here out here. And some of us are gifted with language. I happen to be a pretty good talker. I think I'm pretty good at that. And I have to tell you, words are stupid and slow. It is much easier sometimes to be expressive than to be articulate, right? This is one of the reasons why art and music are so profound, even without words involved. And they touch millions, billions even, across centuries with no additional commentary necessary. I don't think I've ever heard anybody require an explanation as to why you look at Starry Night and go, whoa, whoa, and then you just trip on it for a second. A child could do it. There's lots of things that don't actually require this problem, but you can see it clearly in just about every relational aspect of your life.
Mhm. Yeah, I know there's times where I'm like, "Hey, Josh, I need to talk to you about something," and we're having a conversation. You're like, "What do you mean by that?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? What do I mean by that? I think I was fairly clear about what I said." And you're like, "Hang on, what do you mean by that?" And you're just like, "Slow down and let's figure out what you're trying to tell me in what you're saying, and I'm going to dig this out, and then we're going to have a very different conversation than I intended to have because you go in and dig out what I'm trying to say, or sometimes not trying to say." In saying what I'm saying, which that is a whole nother interesting aspect to this, because sometimes we are giving away that we are trying not to say something when we're trying to say something, and that can also lead to disagreement and misunderstanding when we're trying to obscure the meaning of what we're trying to say.
It's also the case, and scripture talks about this, that to the pure all things are pure, but to the impure all things
Mhm.
are as you are. All things are as you are. So you listen with the lens of your own tendency. If you're a liar, you listen with suspect ears, right? If you're a truth teller, you tend to believe people, but then you become skeptical once you get burned, because naivety is
Mhm.
expensive, right? And so if you have a tendency, you tend to listen with your own tendency, unless the person you're listening to has given you reason not to, right? And so that's another reason why we have this disconnect, because your experience isn't mine. We have overlap in experience, right? The lived Venn diagram of society, but you aren't me. You never have been. And I've never been you. For God's sake, you've never happened before and you'll never happen again. You're the only one of you that's ever going to have that
Mhm.
experience. And so, how is anyone again? Everyone is inconveniently the most presumptuous beast to think that they know what each other thinks. It's wild. It's absolutely
Yeah, and I
wild.
think this and this is where I think I want to explore this a little bit more in our like theological conversations and conversations with other believers, because you hear this a lot in the conversation of like salvation, because there's a lot of different thoughts about how do I get saved? Is it instant? Is this a process? Is this like, am I once saved, always saved? Is this conditional? Is this like there's a whole lot of room for speculation, and there's a whole lot of room for disagreement there, depending on which tradition that you're in.
Right.
And those, I think sometimes those lenses of our different traditions, like if I say to some of my Campbellite friends and family, that people in that world that I grew up with, and I say that I don't know that salvation is an instant process, they look at me like I've got three heads and all of them look extremely stupid with dunce capses on, because they're like, they can't even conceive of the idea that salvation isn't an instantaneous process.
Right. It
And
doesn't even
like,
occur in the process of listening that might be an option, because it's not relevant to them yet.
right, and we have so many of those things that we're not even aware of until we run into somebody, and I say, "I don't think salvation is an instantaneous of one-time event, like, there's work that needs to be done there, and it's part of a whole thing called theosis," and people don't even get, unless you're in my tradition and my context, what I'm even saying.
Mhm.
And it can be very difficult to have conversations with people, and it's like I have to, knowing what I know about the context that you're in, try to translate my context into your context, which translation is a messy business. I've been an interpreter in multiple languages before, And translation is always a messy business. And so you're always trying to have to anticipate what the audience, you're the audience person that you're translating to is going to hear, and trying to anticipate how you think and how you're going to understand what I'm going to say in a language that's not native to me is very messy business.
Right. Right. And I don't natively speak Amber.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why I lend myself to ask what you mean most of the time.
A lot of people do. I get that a lot.
Oh.
Especially lately. I was just, I was talking to somebody at our church, and I was explaining like this difference of this wisdom stuff and part of this chapter of in my thesis I was wrestling. He looked at me and goes, I didn't understand a single word you just said. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, apparently I need to dial it down about 100 degrees and try to explain this in a way that makes sense, because sometimes we get so locked in our own whatever's in our own heads that it doesn't even occur to me that you don't have the 6 months of context shoved in your head that I have shoved in my head. So when I use terms like Solomonic wisdom encompassing and walling in Jobonic wisdom, and you're just gonna look at me and go, huh? And I'm like, well, it's obvious. And you're just like, it's obvious to nobody but you. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing too, is I remember this is something that stuck with me because of how strangely embarrassing it was. It marked me in my memory. I was in about 4th grade, I believe, and I was in a class in elementary school, and we were doing like a group activity where everybody was talking about their favorite music, their favorite band, right? And I had this strange dissonance feeling when I realized for the first time that not everybody was having the same upbringing that I was having, right? And that lens was shifted very rapidly when somebody said their favorite band out loud, and I misheard them. And the teacher said, "What was that?" And I said, "Oh, they said DC Talk," because that was one of my favorite bands. They said ZZ Top, and I was like, "Oh, that's not at all what I would have said."
No.
Wow. And we were cool. We were like friends. You know what I mean? So it was like, whoa, that was a gulf I just crossed all of the sudden. What the heck? So that was enough. It marked my mind, like seriously, forever, for me to think like, but people don't share my experience. Like, that's such a weird revelation to have, that people really don't have they have no idea where you are. They have no clue unless you tell them. That's why most people don't ask how you are, past actually asking the question, how you doing? Then you go, I'm fine. They go, cool. Done. Job done.
Yeah, you're not actually asking the question to find out the meaning behind it, to find out how are you. It's just
Right.
I'm engaging in a social politeness that our culture somewhat dictates. It used to dictate a lot more than it does now. But, it's like this is a social nicety I have to get out of the way before I can say everything that I want to say. And it's like, and then there are some of us who actually, when I ask you, how are you? Like, I actually kind of want to know how you're doing. And it's like, well, let's take a second. And it's like, how are you? No, how are you doing? And then people get confused because they're like, well, I said I'm fine. I'm like, okay, let's go with that, because that's where you are.
I like Troy just popped in and said, twin dropping bombs on language. Words mean nothing. Meaning has words. That is a perfect distillery. That's wonderful. That's like a nice fine whiskey of what I just said.
Yes.
Well done.
It can really create and cause sometimes some real serious offense. And you've seen things like, I don't know what I've seen in this misunderstanding of meaning has split churches.
It has.
It has run people out of ministry. It has driven people to the point of even sometimes taking their own life. Like it is something that we need to be a little bit more, I think, cognizant of and pay attention to, paying attention to listening to people's meaning and not so much concerned about the words you're using, but what are you trying to tell me about that? This is where I think curiosity really helps this problem, because being curious, so okay, what are you trying to say about the thing? Like, tell me more about that, and being more descriptive.
Well, I think it's interesting. Well, I don't remember where I got it from, but I was probably late teens. It might have been my psychology teacher in high school, but he always taught me to assume that starting in a conversation, the person you're talking to has something that you want. Like, assume they know something that you don't know. You have a very different conversation. Even if you disagree with them on the surface and that's the reason you're talking, assume they know something you don't, and you'll actually listen differently. Right? So that's the starter. If you're not there, it's a non-starter, period. You'll hear nothing if you're not listening. Right? Really. Like, that's actually a prerequisite to getting here. You have to actually listen. Right? The other thing is, there's a good example of this in marital counseling. When you're having a disagreement, especially in the form of a disagreement with somebody you're in a relationship, and this is not even just marital, this is relational, period. If it's your best friend, if it's your brother, your sister, your spouse, your children, right? If you're listening to somebody and they said something and it struck you and you think it was wrong, don't tell them you said this. Say, I heard this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Did you say this? This is what I heard. And allow them the space to correct or affirm whatever it was that you heard out of what they said. And then you can actually get something out of what they're talking about. If you're listening, let's say I'm listening to my wife and she says something to me and I'm like, excuse me, right? And I'm upset because like you just said, it can be offensive. Lots of things can be easily offensive. Look at that condensation, that distillation that I just read from Troy a minute ago, right? If you read that with no context whatsoever of this conversation and someone said, words mean nothing, meaning has words, you'd be like, you sound like a kook, right? That sounds kooky until you know exactly what it means. And then it's a perfect distillery of exactly the problem as is. Like, that's really it. But you have to be able to get there, And so I think you have to explain to me 7 times. Yeah, you have to learn how to speak Amberese.
Hey, wait a second. How do you know he's talking about me? That's what I want to know.
That to me before.
That's a huge assumption there, sir.
Oh yeah, that was funny.
Talk about a misunderstanding of meaning. I beg to differ. It just perfectly proved the point right there.
Oh, this is fun already.
But I tell you, my brain is just like running on fumes of over toasted oatmeal because it's so fried out at this point that this is probably going to be as confusing as that. So I will allow it just this time. But like, that's another perfect example of sometimes it takes to be like, I don't have words for the thing. And so I'm going to use the words that I have to express the thing. And then I'm going to expect you to understand what I mean and not what I say, because I'm trying to express the thing that doesn't have words. So Josh, you should just know by these words that I pick are the only words that I have to express the thing I can't express. And if you don't get it, then you're in trouble, because you should just know what I mean behind the words that have no meaning, because the thing that I'm trying to express has no words on it.
Right. This is why most people are jealous of poets, right? Like, or lyricists, good lyricists. It's the same thing, It's a bit more of a jest, but it's a really good example also, is in my favorite book, That Hideous Strength. At the end of the book, there's a scene where a couple of characters are in a kitchen and they're doing something, and well, it's not at the end, it's roughly in the middle, but they're in the kitchen, they're doing something and they're trying to discuss something, and one of the characters, who's like a very very like like very technically correct, I don't have opinions, I only make observations based on the facts kind of person, right? And so his qualm was he's not able to work around women because women speak a language without nouns. And the example that he gave, which is hilarious, right, is if a man is working with another man, he'll say, "Here, take this bowl and put it inside the larger bowl in that fourth cabinet right there." And the female for this is put that and the other one in there. And so that's the collapsing that happens. And it's funny because it's true. Men need that specificity. You'll tell us to go in the fridge and grab ketchup, and we can't see it in front of our faces, but we can spot a deer on the horizon. Like, this is our problem. We're literally not occupying the same space sometimes.
Take you 5% off your grade every time you say that word from here on out. Oh, yes. I know. And I live this reality all the time because being a woman in the theology space, y'all, your beards, you drive me nuts sometimes. I'm like, come on, guys.
Dripping with nouns, just nouns. Oh, man.
Because it can get very tedious sometimes trying to express it in a way that that more guys communicate in certain ways that we that we don't. And it's just like sometimes like, okay, I'm going to explain my theology through the way that I experience it and the way that I feel it. And in the male more side of the conversation, it's going to be, I'm going to technically explain the thing with all of the nuts and bolts and the stuff. And I'm just like, okay, boring. Let's move on. And let's talk about the, and you end up, that's where there's a lot of disconnect in this space because we explain our experience of it differently. And that gets missed a lot too, I think. At least in my experience, that I run into this problem a lot, just in the spaces that I'm in. So I'm just like, well, can we just stop and talk about the emotional impact of that? And they're just looking at me like, what did you just say? Like, theology doesn't have feelings. And I'm like, oh, yes, it does. Can we talk about that? And that one really, really confuses people.
I think you're right. I think that, well, mostly because theology as a modern practice is primarily like a abstracted left brain process that is centered around like articulate propositions that can be repeated rather than around the thing those propositions were initially meant to represent. Like I was saying before, I think language ceased to be as symbolic as it really is. And we start with assumptions as our base. We don't start with clarity. That's one of the things that bothers me a lot too. And I'm having very dense conversations. And one of the reasons why one of my main rules is if I foresee at all a conversation dropping out of necessity and into stupidity, right? I'm going to deviate and I'm going to say, hey, this is something we could discuss differently or maybe even at a different time, right? And so when you get into a place like, let's say on the comment section of a forum, Facebook, Reddit, doesn't matter, whatever it is, the comment section is not a place that lends itself to nuance and clarity. I don't care how great of a writer you are, right? Because when you write, there are certain strengths that lend themselves to writing, but there are certain weaknesses that come with writing, right? Writing is letters on a page. It's rather dead. And you can take language and bring it back to life by speaking it out loud, right? It is actually by way of the exchange of language in that sense that we have one of the closest communions with one another, right? That's why it's actually rather tragic that you live in Oregon and I live down here and I can't give you a hug and you're hearing my disembodied voice through some speakers on your head rather than me sitting in front of you having a conversation as a person, right? And this synthetic thing that we have right now is really neat, but you and I both know that it is synthetic. We've had the experience of being in each other's presence for real. It's a different kind of blessing. and it has its own weight with it. It has its own qualia, right? And so the sound of your voice is attached to you, not the speakers. The voice that I'm hearing is just good enough for me to know that it's you, only because your face accompanies it. But without your face, there are lots of women that sound like women, and it's very difficult to place. There are lots of men who sound like men, and it's very difficult to place, right? And so it's not something that you get from only one of your overlapping senses being involved in something like this, right? But when all of the things that I get, like right now, my visual is on a laptop screen, my auditory is coming from speakers, my ability to interface with you is coming from this camera and this microphone. All of it's synthetic. None of my actual sense data leads back to Amber as a real thing in front of me right now, right? And so that is enough of a disconnect in many ways. And that shows the kind of disconnect that you were talking about with theology. You as the actual thing are being represented to me well enough right now that I can forget it's not the real thing. But if that picture was gone and your voice was a little garbled, that representation would suffer enough I wouldn't even be able to recognize you. And so theology and our discussions often have these same problems. And especially, it's not just that I don't have the pleasure of meeting everyone's acquaintance, right? But I can lend myself to some of the advantages that we have through technology to have some acquaintance with you and be able to, have communion with you in some general sense, as distant as it might be. We don't have these kind of things in relation to us and God's form and function. And so we think that we can get these quick jumps on things. You can't. That's a farce. You won't do it. It's not real. It's not real. There are no shortcuts to knowing God. God is not a celebrity that you know about. That is many people's problem, is they have a very clear picture of their representation, and they think that it's a one-to-one.
Which actually leads me to a question, because I've been thinking about this because there's a whole lot of reasons, but as I've been just listening and communicating with several people and just changing contexts and just a whole lot of things, it occurred to me, like, how often in some of these conversations that happen in church, or especially in these disconnected theological spaces, where I'm trying to express something, and I don't feel seen. I don't feel heard. So I continue to express it, and I try 97 different ways to express it. But what I really need is that incarnational experience, is that thing that's actually going to break through the misunderstanding of my words being meaningless, because what I need, I can't say, I can't express with words. It has to be experienced with others, embodied. And if your experience with others in trying to grow in relationship with Christ is all disembodied, like, how much is the meaning getting missed there? And the words have no meaning because there's no traction to them, because they don't have that experiential meaning behind it.
Right. There's no touchstone to real life. Real life, air quotes, right? Like, if there's nothing that brings it back to my actual experience, because this is the thing. There's lots of this going on, not just in the theological world, also in the political world, in relation to questions about identity and value and rights and so forth. There's a lot of disconnect, right? I don't have the experience of being somebody who has homosexual tendencies or attractions or desire to be in an opposite gendered body or any such thing. I don't share any overlap with that experience. So when people like that talk, I honestly have very little understanding of what they mean, and not in any disrespectful way. It's literally, I don't have anything. I have no hook to hang the hat on. Right. So when I respond to them, right, or if I talk to somebody who is of a different race or something, that like there might be some base assumption that because their color is different than mine, that their experience might be different than mine. It's not their color that facilitates that difference. It's actually the culture in which, the context in which that they grow. That's what defines that. And so it doesn't have anything to do with any of the arbitrary outer characteristics most of the time. And yet, because of our experience and because of the way we've been trained to think about this, we assume that it does. And so we have huge disconnects there as well. You know what I mean? It's not just the theology world. It's almost every field of human relation that has this problem. And it's because of the way that we make assumptions about ourselves and about the other person and about the subject at hand and about our experiences and about other people's experiences and about our influences and their influences and my motives and their motives, right? And a lot of those assumptions, like I said before, as Paul would say, to the pure, all things are pure, right? Because I have Christ in me, reworking me to some degree. I'm able to look at you and say, I don't want to hate you. I want to love you better. And when you hurt me, I see that. But also when you talk about your hurt, I see that, right? This Saturday, just this past Saturday, I had the privilege of going up to Sacramento, which is in Central California, a couple hours away from me drive, right? But it was really neat. And it's worth the drive because every year I'm invited there because the worship team at my church provides the music for a conference that's happening there for the prison ministers of Northern California, right? And so I get to meet all these giants. It's fantastic. And the only reason I'm in that room initially is because I know how to slap skins, man. I can play the drums and I don't actually belong in this room, right? But I've been there for 11 years. And after 11 years or so of doing, I think it's been 11 years, but I think they missed 1 year for COVID or whatever. And so like roughly 10 years of doing this, I now have so much overlap with these people that I understand their stories differently. Right? Because it's touching to hear somebody's testimony and it's powerful. It's powerful to hear somebody's testimony, right? But you only have so much that you can really understand about their testimony because of where it overlaps with you or where it overlaps with your experience with someone else or an exposure that you had maybe through a story or a movie or a book that you have experience kind of vicariously of something that you might be able to map onto your experiences, right? But when you listen to somebody, right? You listen to somebody's story and they're telling you something that's deeply impactful for them. And you hear the passion in their voice. It compels you, right? It does. It's beautiful to hear people talking about things they're passionate, especially positive things. You hear somebody, I came out of jail and while I was there, somebody loved me. Somebody loved me while I was guilty. I was convicted. I was in jail. Somebody came there intentionally to love me personally, bring the Bible to me personally, pray over me, write me letters every month personally, right? That's wild for that person's experience, right? That's wild in that person's experience. But for the person that's doing the thing for them, they're being blessed in an entirely different way, right? Like it's the person who's in jail and the person who's visiting the person jailed, they're not having the same experience. They'll tell the same story of the same event from two opposite poles of experience. And yet both of them are compelling. Both of them are full of meaning, but one of them you might map onto a little bit easier.
I was watching this short the other day. It really caught my attention. And it was this guy, and I wish we could do this, but we're not in the same space, so we can't really do it. But we're just gonna try to recreate it as best we can without this. So imagine I've got a red cord thread in my hand, and Josh, you've got the other end, and you're holding on to the other end of this thing, right? So hold on to your cord there. And if we're embodied in the same space and we're having a face-to-face conversation, that string's going to be tight. There's going to be things that are going to travel back and forth between us on that. And the second, and in the short, the way he did this, he was like, okay, I'm going to pick up my phone and look at my phone while we're talking. And then because I did that, my end goes slack. And he put his phone down and pulled the phone and the line back up. And so then when he's like, okay, well, let's try this. And he pulled his phone back out and he put it face side up on the table. And the other guy on the other side of it, let's slack his line. And he was like, why did you do that? And you said, well, because I didn't feel included and I felt disrespected in that conversation because you made it clear, putting your phone face up, that I wasn't the focus of your attention anymore.
Mm.
And I was just like, wow,
Mhm.
that's really something to think about. Like, where is my, and I'm trying to convey meaning. If my attention is divided,
Mhm.
what meaning am I actually speaking to? And what meaning am I trying to convey to you? If my attention is divided, then the meaning of what I'm thinking about is divided. And
Mhm.
I don't know about a whole lot of other people, but I can only do one thing at a time. I'm not a very good multitasker. It's a disaster every time I try. So I have to focus. So if in this conversation, that's why, I know it's not very technically very engaging for people to ignore the live chat most of the time, but I can't focus on the conversation at hand if
Mhm.
I'm paying attention to that. So, that's why I intentionally don't engage with it as much as other people do, because I want to focus on our conversation, Josh. And then because you're better at, sometimes you'll point out people that say interesting things, and we'll talk about that, or I'll notice it every once in a while, but because I want to focus on the conversation that we're having.
Mhm.
And that to me is the way that I hold my end of the cord up on that, and try to, but those other things that we pull out is it's distracting, and it causes us to lose the tension that is the actual connection and the conveyor of meaning in those conversations.
Mhm. I think a string is a really cool image of that. Um, because there is a tension, right? Like if I want to maintain my wife's attention, right? It's tension is literally most of that word, right? Like there's something there that's grabbing, right? And it's holding still. It's grabbing and it's holding still. If I'm able to maintain attention, it's because either you're finding something worth looking or listening to, right? Or I'm giving something worth looking and listening to, or those are both the same thing. Preferably, they're the same thing, right? But oftentimes, I'm sure I'm talking about things that are just not interesting to Emily, right? Like all the time, I'm probably talking about random things that are just not interesting to her, but she listens anyway because I'm the one doing the talking, right? So it's something that I can tell in those moments. The tension is different. She's intentionally paying attention. It's funny how both of those words have tension right in them,
Mhm.
right? She's on purpose, like withholding her attention from other things and focusing it, right? That is exceptionally hard for me because I have a deficit of attention, apparently, right? I think that it's very interesting that the way that I try to explain that experience is often by saying that I have 10 trains going in my head and I have to pick which one I want to conduct with, right? That's very difficult to mediate and pay careful attention to somebody else and be really understanding what they're saying. So I have to intentionally shut down a lot in order to turn on
Mhm.
only my ears and not my let's say my assumptions, my readiness to respond, and my eagerness of my mouth to articulate what I'm thinking in here in response to what you're saying. Because if I'm that far ahead, I'm genuinely not in listening mode anymore. Right. And it's the case in
Mhm.
my house. And this is something that Emily is very good with. I am not, if I'm listening to her, I have to put my phone down. And if my phone is in my hand, she'll say, babe. And then she'll sit there and not say anything else until my phone is down. Because there are times when I'm writing something or I'm responding to an email, and it's like, if I put this down, I'm going to forget what the heck I was doing and I'm not even going to come back to it. Right. I have to finish what I'm doing here. Then I'll give you my entire attention. Right. There are people who are so upset by this immediately that they're not willing to wait that extra 30 seconds for the text to finish because they feel the disrespect of that. They feel that your attention is being pointed at something else, and that experience informs rather than your words, because you're not saying anything. You're just finishing something that you're doing. And you could say, hold on a second, babe. That hold on a second, babe, might be coming from you in a genuine response. And to them feels like, am I not as important as whatever the heck you're texting or you're writing or you're looking at or whatever video you're watching or whatever thing? Am I not that important? And so that is part of it. That communication goes way beyond where the words begin and end. That kind of communication hits deep, and it's built by patterns of recognition. It's not built by a sentence. That's built on years of expectation, met or not met, right? And so it's very difficult to navigate that kind of thing with words. Good luck to you. Should you do it without words? No. You should at least use words. But if you're bad at it, guess what? I became a good talker by doing it badly. That's how I became a good talker. I became a good listener by doing it badly. And if you're not willing to start out by doing it badly, you're not going to start out by doing it well. So guess what, Jack? You're going to start out by doing it badly. That's where you're going to start. And if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to get good at doing that, because these are really hard things. And you're not going to just be good at it on the house. Like, you're probably not. There are some people that have certain talents and certain affinities. There are really deeply empathic people that have a tendency to listen. They still have this translative problem because their empathy might not transfer to the person who's speaking. The person who's speaking might be a very blunt person, and the person who's listening empathically might be very hurt by a blunt person. And neither person is hearing what's being said or being expressed, because both are at ends, not by the words, but by the persons, right? And so there's a lot that's going on in there. There's a lot of undertone for this. There's a lot of this that's built into your body. It's built into your facial expressions. There are people that just have a harder time recognizing facial expressions. Heaven forbid you have a stroke on the right side of your brain. You'll have a hard time reading what in the world eyebrows mean. And all of us have a cheat sheet. We wear it on our faces. But there are people that don't understand that. Heaven help us, man. Like, this is all very complicated, because I don't have the privilege of seeing the world from behind those eyes.
And then there's people like me who have like no filter, and everything goes right across my face before I even realize it most of the time. And my friends give me a hard time about this all the time, because there are certain people who know me well who will just look at me and go, okay, there is something definitely going on back in there behind that, in that head of yours. What in the world is going on? And I busted every single time. And it's, but and I think too, Josh, I was just thinking about this with the guy and the short and that phone thing. Like, our attention spans and our ability to listen enough to get the meaning behind things is being even more neutered by shorts and algorithms and clicking, and not being able to tolerate long conversations because I want to get my opinion out there really fast, and that's all that matters.
Right. And the only way that I can feel like my opinion matters is if people all respond positively to it. Right. And like all at once too. Right. I want to go viral with my opinion and be recognized. I want to be affirmed. Right. Like, those are the things that we're all being right now, every day, conditioned to not only want, but somehow expect. Right. It is interesting that our attention is being capitalized on presently. Our attention is being capitalized on. Actually, in real life, being capitalized on, your attention is worth money now in a way that it never was before. Seconds at a time of your attention are worth money now to someone. Your attention is being capitalized on. That is a new world, and we don't know what to do with it. We don't understand it at all. It's a very weird place that we live now.
And it makes it so that when we actually do slow down to talk to people, it's just like, you know, I don't know how to have conversations with people anymore. It's like we're in a whole new context where everything is centered on me and what I'm into and my interests and what's going on in my world. And stepping back from where we are in this reactionary culture with shorts and notifications and all this crazy social media that makes us think we're more important than we are, stopping to say, you know what? I'm going to have a conversation with Josh when I come down to visit here, hopefully soon, and I'm going to just focus on you. And what do you want to say? What's interesting to you? What's going on in that head of yours? Because I really want to know what's going on in a slow way that takes 3 hours to have a conversation, like we do sometimes when we actually have the time to do that. Like, you know,
Right.
that's so important, slowing down to stop and say, I'm going to put everything that's in my head off to the side as much as I can, which is terribly hard when you have ADHD, because part of the like the interrupting and want to join in the conversation is because I appreciate and I love you and I like what you're talking about. So I want to engage with you and and that's why I will put that into that conversation. And it's so hard not to do that, not because I'm trying to be rude and interrupt, because I'm so fascinated and engaged in what you're saying. Like, I just can't, or I'm going to explode. And that's hard for people who don't have that, like, to understand. Like, I'm not trying to cut you off because I'm trying to cut you off and be rude. It's just like, I will explode if I don't say that out loud, because I'm so interested and want to connect. And that's how I connect with you, is by saying, yeah, that's cool. Like your DC talk story earlier, I really had to fight this one, because I'm like, I've heard so many crazy stories about people who have like DC talk connection stories about stuff. So I remember the first time I heard about DC talk, I was at church camp when I was a kid, and I was around friends, and I had been in the Midwest and was visiting back in where we used to live in Idaho. And one of the gals, when we were cleaning up the cabin, she goes, "Hey, have you heard DC talk?" And I was like, "No, why? Does he talk funny?" And she literally fell over on the floor. She was laughing at me so hard. I was like, "Why?" And she went on to explain. She pulled out her CD player and she started her tape player, sorry. And she started playing.
Yeah, cassette tapes, exactly.
Like,
It was a Walkman,
this
probably.
is a it was. It's just like this. And I was like, oh my gosh. Because I didn't stop and like I thought I was asking a clarifying question when it was really kind of a stupid question. But it was it was like these conversations can go so crazy wrong sometimes when you're just assuming what, what they're meaning when they're talking about that. Because you know late middle schoolers, early high schoolers are not always the kindest human beings to each other. So there's usually a lot of pointing out of differences amongst each other going on. And so that's where my brain went. And she was just like, no, it's sorry. Anyway, like, because it's just, and I think the whole point is just finding these points of connection and making space for each other in those conversations to both be able to express what's meaningful for us, because that's where the connection happens, is the connection in meaning and not necessarily the connection in the words. Because if you rely only on the connection with the words, it's going to fail every single time.
Exactly. Which is why no one's ever happy when you see for the first time a book that's made into a movie.
Right.
Because when you read that book, you read the book. You didn't watch that
Mhm.
movie, right? And then when somebody
Mhm.
watches a movie and then goes and reads the book, they're like, whoa, there's like hella stuff missing. What happened? Right? Like, yeah, that's because translating word into visual format is exceedingly difficult, because what you're
Mhm.
imagining as you hear the words is rather subjective,
Mhm.
like genuinely
Yep.
subjective, right? And I know that this
Yeah.
is a problem when you go back to the political and the theological world with subjective and objective, but really it's a significant problem here. We can't pretend it away that if I'm trying to talk about a table and then you say that my sense data is unreliable. If you take away my sense data, what in the flying world is a table? We don't know.
Right.
You actually require this. It's kind of important that you know that subjectivity doesn't mean falsehood. It's rather important to know that your sense data is not an unreliable liar. It's rather important that you know that your emotions are probably the only part of your rational experience that can't lie. They can be wrong. So can you, so can your conscience, and so can your rationality for that matter. But your conscience and your rationality can be manipulated. Your emotions are not the only thing that have that problem, you see. And so your rationality happens to be the only thing that can justify itself with reasons and come up with lies and believe them. Right? Your emotions are actually much more honest than you give them credit for. And so when Amber talks about experience and things like that, what she's talking about is real kind of inward honesty of that type. It's very expensive to express that out loud. Men are very shy of this. Not that women aren't, but men are particularly shy of any form of this, even if it's lying and manipulative. Right? And so it's very difficult to cross a lot of these bridges. It's not simple. And when we look at something like subjective and objective, it's very difficult in any sense to say what is objective. And I don't say that as somebody who thinks that everything's up in the air for grabs. But really, none of my experiences have been objective because they're subject to my senses and my experience and my interpretation of my experience and my ability to articulate it to you and your ability to overlap with it sufficiently to understand what in the world I am trying to articulate. Right? And so all of it is rather context dependent. Even the exchange of scientific data is context dependent. Even the search for scientific inquiry. Why are you choosing that scientific project? Why those sets of facts? Why that set of data? It's because you have a goal in mind that's nested in something you want. You personally, it's relevant to you. That's why you want it. At bare bones, you're involved from the bottom to the top.
This is one of my growing frustrations because I think that objective and subjective really are false ways to categorize things, because it really
Sometimes
all of it comes down to an experience. Because even if you're like, okay, this is an objective science, experiment thingy, the scientific method in and of itself is an unnatural set of circumstances, because you have to contrive the environment to be reduplicate, so that you can be reproduce it exactly over and over and over, and nature doesn't work that way. So even what we label science is really built on a falsity, because it doesn't exist really, because that nature doesn't work that way. And so what, because like if I give you, okay, so Josh, if I'm gonna give you a cup of something, okay, and you don't know what's in there, and I'm like, tell me about this, right? And if you're going to be like, okay, well, objectively, I'm going to stick this in my little sciencey thing over here, and it's going to give me a printout of the nutritional breakdown and the molecular structures and all of that stuff that Troy does with his job, that tells him stuff and things like exactly. But that's not going to tell you like much about what's in that cup. It's going to tell you about the things that like are observable in a certain sense about that, but it's not going to tell you like, I'm like, okay, well, do you like it? Well, you haven't even, like, how do I know? I just looking at this thing in here and I'm just like, I don't, first of all, do I trust you enough to even try this? Because I don't know what's in there. Like, I have no clue, but I'm not going to know whether all of these like things that we label as objective and subjective ways to understand the world have zero meaning until I actually take that thing and you just take a big swig of it. And that's going to tell you, is it hot? Is it cold? Is it sweet? Is it sour? Do I like it? Is it got poison in it and I'm about to drop dead? Is it, like there's a whole lot of things you're not going to know until you actually take a big gulp of that thing. And then all of this quote unquote objective and subjective stuff has some sort of of relevance in reality, because the experience and the experiential knowledge is the thing that's really driving the bus.
Yeah. Well, it's I would yeah. I would say our experience is a very weird
Mhm.
thing, because it is
Mhm.
the basis, but it's also the thing that is most shared, and also the thing not shared, which is the problem, right? So
Mhm.
it's all of those things at once. It's really rather complicated. And so it's not like subjective and objective are categories that I think are wrong a lot of the time, but not all of the time, right? Like, the meaning behind numbers is not subjective. We couldn't have discovered math any other way. If you discover math and you do it differently than where the formula goes, you're wrong. You're not discovering something new. You're just doing it wrong, right? Like, so there are things that are objectively true in every circumstance, irrespective of experience and opinion and stuff. But those are the things that actually they're irrelevant until they meet experience. And so I think that's actually the thing that matters, is that numbers and philosophical categories and and things of that kind, right? Like, you know, let's say measurements and like anything that is
Mhm.
genuinely impersonal. Those are the things that are allowed to be objective. And it's because they're abstractions, right? When you believe them objectively as truths, they're abstractions in your head, because they actually aren't nested in your experience. They're abstracted, which is why they're rather loose and jangly sometimes. And we need systems to categorize them and organize them and suppress them into exactness so that we can detail out them, right? We need to be able to distinguish. We need to be able to make like specific fine lines, right? It's the difference between looking at the letter Paul wrote to the Ephesians and looking at chapter 1 verse 2, right? When Paul wrote that letter, it was not divisible into chapters and verses. That practice came far later, when it was of ease to make reference to particular sentences or phrases in particular writings. We would then give them titles and demarcations and be more and more specific. But before then, there was a lot more elbow room, you see, because all those distinctions didn't exist the same way. And we made
Mhm.
those distinctions to try to cut out a lot of this confusion. And as we made those distinctions, we kind of shot ourselves in the foot, because we exploded the complication of the problem too. It's not just that we're not understanding what Paul says. It's we're not understanding what you said about what Paul says. We're not understanding what Calvin said about what Paul says. We're not understanding what Calvin said about what Paul said about what the Psalm said. We're not understanding what James White said about what John Calvin said about what Paul said about what Moses was talking about. There's a huge level of complication here. It's
Mhm.
seriously deeply seated, right? It's very, very, and so that's why it's the case that when we come down to this at the atomized individualistic kind of level, what we see is actually not people slowly coming into agreement, but a fragmentation into oblivion, as no longer need the consensus by which these things were originally determined and set apart and distinguished. It used to be that the we was led by the Spirit, okay? And now
Mhm.
it's me that's led by the Spirit. And you hopefully agree with me and the Spirit, right? That's a very fragmented way of looking at things, because now theology is customizable to me,
Mhm.
right? When in reality, it isn't. It isn't. My experience is customizable to me. That's fantastic. And it should be. My identity has something that's really custom to me in some real way, right? Like even my genetics have something that's very custom to me. My own DNA is mine, right? But that's not the end of the story, right? Because Christianity is not a lone wolf experience.
Mhm.
Christianity is a communal endeavor, right? And so when you engage in something like that, you don't get to have me and the spirit say this, and hopefully you agree with us.
This reminds me of something that I heard Ray Lubeck talk about in one of his classes, that just, it has stuck with me for a really long time, and I've gone back around to thinking about it a lot again. He was giving this lecture, and he was talking about criticizing this thing that's called historical critical method. That, what, I'll do a whole video on that later, but he spent probably 30 minutes just absolutely blasting the idea of the original audience and this myth of the original audience, because he's like, think about it. And so he grabbed everybody who was sitting on the front row, and he read off something, a piece of paper he just randomly picked up in his pile of papers on his desk, and it was instructions for how to turn on the projector, right? So he randomly picked that up and he read it, and then he went and asked all of them what they heard, and everybody had a different version of what they heard. He's like, the original audience is a myth because you cannot predict what somebody 3,000 years ago was hearing somebody else say, because you can't even get people in the same context, in the same room, in the same class to hear me give a set of very, very, carefully worded instructions to hear the same thing. So this idea of an original audience is a myth, because it doesn't exist, because nobody's going to hear that the same. What we have to do is we have to back up and we have to listen to the meaning of what the author is trying to tell us, because that's the important thing, not what a group of imaginary people that aren't going to agree with each other about what they heard think that they heard. What we have to do is we have to stop, slow down, and listen to what the author and the meaning of the storyteller is trying to tell us, not what his audience thinks, he said.
Which is a much easier problem, eh? Mm-hmm. One person is a lot less complicated than, 8 billion.
I mean, if you've been on Twitter for more than 5 minutes, you know that you can't even post good morning without a whole bunch of people having an allergic reaction to just saying good morning to people, right?
What's good about it, Smee?
Then you end up with this whole Gandalf scenario of, what do you mean? Do you mean that it's a good morning, or it's a morning to be good on, or that you want me to have a good morning? And you get into this whole or
that I'll have one whether you want it or not.
Yes, exactly. And I'm just like, seriously, I just said good morning. I got rid of Twitter for that. One of the reasons I got rid of it, because it was just a swamp. But trying to, this is one of those things that's, I'm again thinking about, because, as we are talking about how do we have conversations, and I can't, because you are my audience, I can't predict what you're going to say. I just have to be careful with the meaning that I am putting forward. And then it's your responsibility to interact with what I'm meaning, so that I can understand that you are understanding my meaning. It isn't it is not like I have to get past this idea that my audience, of 1 or 2 or however many people that I'm talking to, just is going to understand what I say, and everybody's going to understand it the same way, because that's a lie. That's a myth. It doesn't exist. So I have to be very careful to interact, to make sure that I'm pulling out what you heard my meaning, and then reacting to what you're thinking the meaning is. And that's where that communication, because the words don't mean anything if we have different understandings of what the meaning of those things are, and the meaning behind it, and the deeper things that are going on under the surface there of those communications.
What's fun is actually probably I don't even know, almost 2 years ago, something like that, I did a Cosmic Corner episode about what I called universal languages, which are nonverbal communications that are universal in that kind, right? One of them that came up was music, right? Mm-hmm. Music is something that crosses those boundaries. You don't have to be specially classically trained to have your emotions go off when the violin hits just right. Right? You don't have to be trained to know that your head bobs a little bit when the syncopation of the beat hits just right. You don't have to be a professional speaker to notice that somebody has a rhythmic cadence in
Mhm.
their voice when they want to make emphasis. You don't have to even know why that's happening, but it does hit you. It does.
Mhm.
You also need to know that when people are using music in the background of movies, they're giving you something just as contrived as an experience, because in your real life, you don't have that happening. You have to fabricate that for yourself. But in a movie, you don't even ask why it's happening. It matches tone perfectly because the music is conveying something about the experience the movie is giving. The words coming from the mouths, the stuff on the screen, the faces on the screen, or the colors or whatever else by itself can't say loud enough, and so it needs that accompaniment or something that's not being shown on screen,
Mhm.
that's being implied by the change in shift and in tone. You see this in all kinds of movies, right? You see this in romance films.
Mhm.
You know hubby's about to walk around the corner and be back from war because that violin swell starts nice and low.
Mhm.
And as it starts, so does the swelling in your eyes. And as it reaches its peak and flows over, so too do you flow over. And that is exactly intentional because it can incite that universal experience by way of a particularized, repeatable thing. It's very, very consistent what it does, right? But also, doesn't that sound particularly manipulative,
Mhm.
right? Are the romance films only romantic because they know how to hit your soft spot? No, but yes. It's the same with scary movies, right?
Uh-huh.
You know that something awful is about to happen because a bass surge occurs and a high note that's at dissonance with that bass
Mhm.
surge starts taking it and it grabs you. And you are ready for a jump scare that you're not ready for, which is why you jump. Your neurology is being prepared for something your conscious experience has not noticed yet. How are they able to bypass that filter and not tell you a thing, but get your body prepped for something that you don't know is coming, or you wouldn't jump?
Mhm.
But you know it's coming. Somehow
Right.
you know, right? It's like that's the weird thing. These experiences are mapped on, and that's why we respond. And music is the overlapping of harmonious patterns in the way that our expectations would like to be met in real life. Music synthesizes that. It allows for that experience to be transferred from me to you. I can write a soulful song without words, right? But it's because I've learned the language that music affords, right?
Mhm.
And if you think about music as a language, that's how jam sessions work between musicians. Get in the same room as other people that play music, and you guys just kind of agree. You start playing something, and then the bass agrees with the guitar or the piano, and the piano agrees with and then the rhythmic value that the drummer adds to it or on top of it agrees with you see what I'm saying? And that establishes something. And when people hear that, they hear that process, it genuinely kind of like draws from you something new. They're creating something. And that's funny that Troy says that's exactly where I was going. Music is often represented as a
Yep.
creation narrative. This happens in Tolkien's narrative, that happens in the Narnia stories, right? It's that the music that the creator made was performed not by the creator but by someone else, and in that performance everything else happens. And so it's this spread, you know what I mean? It sources somewhere and then it spreads and then it takes effect. It's just like this drawing out. And music does that. And it can create and it can pull out. You know what I mean? So it's very interesting that it's used that way. That's spot on. Good job, Troy.
And I think it's also the power of iconography because there's very little words,
Mhm.
especially in the scenes and the portrayals of the stories in scripture. You don't need very many words because it's all very visual, and you read that and the layers of the picture and the colors and everything is so intentionally layered that you just get it comes out and it draws you in and envelops you, and you can't help but engage with it if you'll allow it to, because it can be a very powerful wordless medium to experience what is really the I'm not sure. Like this is one of those things that doesn't have words to it. The experience of the biblical narrative in this form that goes around and over and under and through words that doesn't need words to be understood.
Well, or it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be articulate to be understood.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
because it's not that it's inarticulate either. Because you can look at an icon and you can explain what it means, and its meaning can be consistent, right? That's something that's really striking. Its
Mhm.
meaning can be consistent, right? When it shows, let's say in certain icons, when you see a particular like object that's there, or a particular building shape, or a specific person, or something that's on or around the person that signifies something, there's a consistency of use, right? There's a consistency of use that makes that kind of legible and understandable. It makes it comprehensive, and you get the. This is something that I love about like looking at icons is if you look at the face in an icon, you can see something portrayed about even the life of the saint being portrayed,
Mhm.
right? Because there are icons of saints who are known for being people of particular hardship and sorrow, and it's written on their face in the preservation of that person in an icon, right? That's so interesting to see that person's story expressed in an icon, because it's not expressed in words. But when you see it expressed in words, you can see it in the icon, right?
Mhm.
You can identify the two. Now the meaning has function and form in a unique way.
Yeah, I
Right,
understand.
exactly.
But like
And so
this is my new favorite one because this one has a little bit different take on it. It's kind of hard to see. It's a little bit blurry. But the sheep face on this one, it's just like because normally it's just like this tired, exhausted sheep, and this one is just plain angry. This sheep is just like, seriously, this is not a thing. Like the facial expression that was done by that iconographer, I'm like, I'm so feeling that because it just the even the different interpretations of some of those things bring a nuance to it that hits you in different ways depending on where you're at and what the context that you're looking at them in and how the different iconographers interpret what those stories and those symbols are. It can be really interesting sometimes.
there's actually something interesting in the chat also. Fire King said,
Yeah.
you have the words in scripture. Why do you
Hmm.
need iconography to be wordless and explain something that's already explained in scripture? Well, that's pretty simple actually, because we're human. That's the first reason. The second reason is that most humans, for most of history, have been entirely illiterate, and so there's that problem. And then third, you have most of human history. It was not readily available for you to own a Bible privately, let alone to have paper. This is exceedingly rare for those things to happen until the last maybe 2 centuries, where people started to have
Hmm.
books, really have books, right? Like privately. You could have a library in your own house if you weren't independently wealthy. You could have like 15, 20 books in your house. That was something, you know? Like even in the late 1800s, if you had, 20 books, you had a decent library, people that had libraries, like libraries, they were independently wealthy, like rather eccentric wealthy folks, right? Like books were very hard to have, let alone
Yeah.
something like the Bible. When you're talking about the way that icons were used across the centuries, icons stood in a gap for people. That's what they did in a very real way. The window to heaven that scripture affords us
Hmm.
was made into icons.
And I think that there's this assumption in several different traditions, and I don't want to get too stuck on this, but I think because I this is something I also had to unlearn is that when we think about like God's word and we're talking about like the gospel and we're talking about the things contained within the book in our hands, we've gotten to where in our modern context, like when we talk about God's word, we are not talking about the way that it came about and was carried orally for thousands of years because they didn't trust the written word. Now we have replaced the oral and the communicative nature that scripture was born into with a bound set of symbols in our hands that we've been arguing about since the thing hit the printing press. So, if the book with the words in it was enough, you wouldn't need anything else because it would settle everything, which it actually just made things worse by giving everyone this paper with these symbols on it that has replaced the conversational oral nature. Because if you sit down, I did this with the one of the classes that I'm working with TAing. We had them. We want you to sit down and read this out loud. Read this book out loud before you come to the next lecture. And people's experience, it just blew them away. Instead of just sitting there silently with their little whatever, taking their notes and making their marks and doing their things, actually, like, don't listen to somebody else read it. I want you to sit down and read it. And like, if it's your dog, your kid, like whoever, read it out loud to somebody else and just like experience what that does. And it blew a lot of them away. They were like, we had no idea that this is something that was supposed to be an experiential conversation. We're talking about Christ and the words and the stories of God, not about this piece of paper with the scribbles on it.
Right. Exactly. And then the other, what's even it's interesting too because it does come there's it's a very popular sentiment, I would say, that comes with, we have it in scripture, why do you need anything else?
Mhm.
God's already said it, why do you need something else to say what God already said, right? I'm not saying that we need something else to say it. I'm not saying that God saying it wasn't enough. But good Lord, I tell my wife I love her like every 5 seconds, but I also show her. It wasn't just that I said it, right? Like, that's what real life is made of. We need that. We need things to come true. You know what I mean? Like, we need the promise fulfilled. That's what we need. So if I tell my wife I love you and then I treat her like hell, it doesn't matter what I said,
Mhm.
right? Like, I'd be full of crap. But if I show her love her by doing things intentionally that are loving to her, and then I tell her I love you, that
And
means
it
something very new.
Mhm. And I think that goes back to earlier, Josh, what you were saying about Emily, because sometimes when we're so busy like this with our Bibles, what icons and what music and some of these other things that we're doing, it makes you go, "Hey, put that down. Pay attention to me." And sometimes Christ is like, "Pay attention to me, dude. Like, this is good, but experience me."
Hmm.
Experience me in looking at this art and these icons. Experience me in this music and in standing together with someone, reading scripture together and singing songs together. Experience me together. Get your nose out of the book.
It's also the case that, like, and I've said this, I don't remember if I said this on your channel, but I've said this before, at least on Faith Unaltered, that if if you want the quickest way to ruin a hug, try to explain why you're hugging. Like, try to explain what a hug is, and you'll ruin it so
Mhm,
quick. You'll ruin it, right? Um, if I wanted to tell my kids that I love them and that when I hug them, that means that I love them, the best way to tell them that is by just giving them a freaking hug. That's how you do it. You give them a hug. You don't try to explain the thing and destroy it, right? Because
mhm,
that's what you're doing. This is actually one of the most counterintuitive things about studying symbolism. You make a symbol articulate and you broke it. Like, that's how you break it. That's how you destroy a
mhm,
symbol, is by making it into a proposition. You've effectively broken it, right? So if I tell you that thorns are a symbol of suffering. Then I might have granted you a little bit of revelation for a moment, right? But if I show you an image of a rose with thorns on it and tell you that it's the beauty of love, that is just the right amount of ambiguity that you can look at that symbol and it can tell you about itself. But the moment I spell it out for you, I broke it, right? The moment I try to spell it out, I broke it, right? And so, like, we do the same thing often with God, and then we end up treating him like he's a math problem or a machine, right? And then we wonder why we don't have a very close and emotive experience with God. We want to know, why can't I have a hug from God? You can. Go around your Christian friends. Those are God's hands and feet, and those are God's arms that are giving you a hug. He owns those arms. He owns that mouth. He owns that person enough that when they do it to you, they're not only doing it to you, they're doing it to Christ in you. Okay? Here's the crazy part. You being blessed is Christ being blessed. It's not just Christ giving you a hug, it's Christ receiving one in you. That's the two ends of this awesome thing that God has going for us, right? Is we get to be a blessing and we get to be blessed. We get both of those things, right? If you want to see somebody who really needs a hug from God, get a hug from God, give them a hug and praise the Lord in it. Pray for them while you hug them and invite the Father over what it is that you're doing with them, and invite him into what you're doing for them. Say, Father, I thank you that you gave me the opportunity to be the hands that hug this person for you. I love that you're in me hugging this person. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, God, for giving this person a hug. If you don't know that that's what you're doing, you'll miss it also. But you'll have a deeply meaningful experience if you know that when you hug somebody, that Jesus is hugging that person in you. And that when somebody hugs you, Jesus is receiving that hug too with you. He's not just giving it, he's receiving it. He's involved. He's relational. He's very personal with you. That informs such a deep texture to how it is our experiences can be meaningful. Because there are people that get a hug at church and they think it's weird and they think it's off-putting and it's socially strange. And I don't need this physical contact. I don't need this. I don't want to be bombarded by happy faces that tell me that they're glad I'm here. And here's the bulletin board, or here's the prayer card, or whatever other weird platitude that we try to attach to this to add to welcome. Welcome doesn't need friends. Welcome knows how to give friends welcome. You just love them. That's it. You don't need a prayer card. You don't need a QR code. You don't need to say it 5 times because there's 5 greeters. You just need to love somebody. And if the congregation was in on loving people, you wouldn't need special assigned faces at the door so that nobody felt missed.
You know, I think I was thinking about while you were talking. I heard this story on the news one day when I was traveling around listening to some podcast. I don't remember, and it was talking about how women, when they receive a hug, have to be held for at least 7 to 10 seconds for that to penetrate in, for them to feel like they can actually receive that they have value, right? And because I didn't used to be a hugger, I was like, get away from me. Like, I was one of those, like, you go stand over there and we'll talk from about 12 feet away, because I was not a fan for lots of reasons. And then as I was listening to them talking about that, it hit me that the parish that I'm in now, there's this older woman named Alexandra, and she just is absolutely beautiful. And she was one of the first people that made me feel seen and valued there, because every time I went, she walked up to me and she gave me a really, really long hug. And then she would look at me and say, I see you. I love you. I'm glad you're here. And then she would walk away because that's about all the English that she spoke because she speaks Arabic, right? So that's the English that she has.
Mm.
But it made me feel so seen. And I was like, if I do nothing else for anybody else for the rest of my life, just being the person who grabs you and gives you a really long hug until you are uncomfortable. And then I say,
Mhm.
I see you. I'm glad you're here. That is massive because of what Alexandra did for me. And I've seen her do it to everybody else who comes in that door. And that is more valuable than any words or I think we're doing a disservice by the first thing you do when you walk in. Here's a QR code of how to get connected. No, I'm going to walk over. I'm going to give you a gigantic hug, and I'm going to say, "I see you. I'm glad you're here." Like
Right.
it, to me,
Exactly.
the absurdity of handing someone a symbol to get them on their face in their phone, disconnected from people, to welcome them into a disconnected space is absolutely crazy. It really
Yeah,
is to me. Like
exactly.
that's the opposite of how that works. That we need a lot more Alexandras in the world that just walk over and hug you whether you want it or not
That's
until you
me.
feel seen.
I I'm
Yes,
I
I
am not
know.
even mildly intrusive about it either. I will give you a bear hug,
Oh,
and I love you.
it's fantastic. I know. I can't wait for another one, man. I'm overdue.
Roddy said something interesting in the comments here too. He said, I don't like to be touched, to each his or her own. I respect that as a present tense, but that's something that demarcates something gone wrong. And what I mean by that is not a poke at you. It's part of our biology as human creatures God designed. If a baby is born, even if it is given the right amount of light, warmth, water, food, blankets, music, if it is not touched, it will die. It will die miserable. This is actually not negotiable. We need this as part of the meaning and fulfillment of being human. Full stop. It's why it's so exceedingly rare that someone can function as an actual monk in actual isolation, and it's rarely permanent, right? It is something that we need that. And so even if it's not connected specifically to physical hugging or whatever, it's the same reason we give handshakes to our manly friends. And when you give a handshake, there's a certain way that you do it because your handshake means something. At least when I was growing up, that's what I was taught by my elders, is that your handshake means something. I was also taught you don't shake a woman's hand unless she extends her hand to you, and you don't shake it like a man's hand. And if the woman that you're talking to has a husband and you're saying hello to them, you shake his hand as you say hello to her. Those are mannerly things that are were meaningful and signified much of the same thing, but with the kind of boundaries that many people are asking for. But here's the thing. Those boundaries are synthetic,
Mhm.
right? What we actually want and what we actually get from the kind of affection that we're talking about is something that breaks down the walls that enables the kind of healing that we would need in order to love hugs again. It needs to be broken because presently
Mhm.
it's broken. And we've fixed it up with crutches to keep it still so it doesn't hurt anymore. But the moment those crutches fall, everything collapses, right? But in order to heal the thing, that ugly, broken structure needs to collapse. We need that.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah, and
not a,
yeah.
that's like not a negotiable. That's a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I went from being the same, like, allergic to hugs, and because of Alexandra and a few more people, Joshua Davidson, I have learned that it is, when I every time I go to church now, there are people that I always look for because I know I'm going to get a very nurturing hug out of them. Even if we say nothing, I don't have to say a word to most of these people. I just walk over and I get a giant hug from them, and that is enough. Like, I don't have to say anything to them, and I walk away feeling seen and loved. because I get, and so now I have become another one of those Alexandras. And if somebody's new, I'll walk over, and which is very weird for me because I am usually a very like reserved person at first. I'm very shy until you get to know me, and then I talk a lot. But but I
Amen.
will quiet. Then I will walk over and just to the new people and just not even just like hi, welcome, and give them a really big hug until they get like uncomfortable, and then I'll let them go, and I'm just like, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome. And it really does make a huge difference to people in such a disconnected world when we are living in a place where human contact is discouraged and we are sucked into the existence like this that has nothing to do with the tangible reality. To force people to put that down, like me now, it really bothers a couple of people that like Dave being one of them. When I go to liturgy, I leave my phone in the car, but that's from like 8 in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm unreachable,
Mhm.
and that's intentional because my focus and my attention is where it needs to be, and there is very few things that need to invade that space. And so, and most all of those, with except one, maybe one or two exceptions of some things, will all wait until I'm done with my family and spreading around as much love as we can, just hanging out, talking, experiencing life, and being together. And I try to hug a new person I haven't hugged before in the parish there every single week. And so I have gotten to just brave. And I know, and then there's a lot of people I don't know their names, but I'll just walk over and give them a hug because I'm so glad to be there and I'm so glad that they are there. And it's just
Right.
like I've turned into a hugger because I have learned to live on them as a positive thing and an experience of Christ. That is one of those ways that we experience Christ together, is by that physical act of holding on to you until you get that 7 to 10 seconds to absorb that feeling of being seen and feeling special. And it's just, yeah, it's anyway.
Yeah. Well, it can be overwhelming though, you know. Um, I've had I've had experiences of this that are not in church, by the way,
Yeah.
because Emily and I have had a lot of experience, and me, probably me more so, but Emily with me, and even my kids sometimes have a lot of experience with the homeless. And my wife and I, when we can, like to take some of our money and go and buy out the warmer table at Little Caesars and just buy all of the large pizzas they have prepared, 10, 20 pizzas, right? Just
Mhm.
buy all of them, load up my car, or maybe she'll make like 2 gallons of chili and 5 trays of cornbread or something, and then we'll pack up a bunch of little duffel bags with supplies like socks and stuff like that. Just blessing brigade, right? You find an encampment, you find a homeless person, right? And then you make a bunch of noise so they'll come out to you to keep it safe, right? Because you don't want to intrude, right? You make noise. Hey, we have some supplies out here. Does anybody here need anything? Is anybody in need of anything? We have stuff. Starts lit. We have food. We have this. We have that. Come out. Whatever. And as they're out and they're grabbing something, as I'm handing it to them, I'll ask them, "What is your name?" And then I'll repeat their name back to them 4 or 5 times in the next 3 seconds. I'll use their name as the capstone, the beginning and end of every sentence that I give to them. I'll give their name back to them. Identify, you are still here. I see you. You're real. Homeless people are used to being treated like ghosts. They really need this, right? And so you give that back to them, and then say, "Here, can I actually, can I, like, hand this to you, or because like boundaries are important with these people, right?" But one of the
Mhm.
things that's very disarming is when you tell somebody, "Here, this is for you. I want this to be for you, John. I want this to be for you, Tara. I want this to be for you," right? You give them and you tell them their name. And then as you hand it to them, before they're able to take it from you, you stop and you automatically begin to pray and invite God and tell God about this person by name in front of them. And I tell you with 100% certainty, I have had 10 out of 10, right? Every single time this goes well. I do not ask them questions. I don't even ask if I can pray for them. I just begin to pray for them. And as I'm praying, I thank the Lord for what he's done on their behalf in the Christ and in the incarnation and in his love for them and the way that he prepared me and my heart and my wallet to be a blessing to them as they arrive. And this thing that's being given to them is not just coming from me. It's coming from God. And it's coming from God who loves them and has an attention toward them and desires to be with them and everything else. And by the end of it, some of these people are just crying and they need a hug right now. And then they just kind of collapse into you. They need that, but it's like, finally, you know what I mean? That's heavy. That is heavy, right? Not everybody can do that, especially on a consistent basis. It's hefty work to care for people at their lowest. But if you can do that, you will fly daily. I'm telling you, it is a high of its own, you know? And I'm somebody who suffered with depression for many years and sometimes has bouts of this, but it is far less rare because my life is so full of meaning and responsibility that I don't have room most of the time anymore. Right? And it's like I'm being molded and shaped by all of those things. And I'm not even the person in the low place, but I'm being molded and shaped in it. You know what I mean? Like I need that. They need that. It is impossible to replace with anything else to give somebody their humanity back. It's beautiful.
Yep. So I think as we're going to wrap this up here, because we're getting close to 2 hours. So I want to just kind of, because we've kind of meandered all over the place, which is typical for you and I, having meandering conversations. I love meandering conversations. They turn out to be the best. And, you know, you get too structured and then you get stuck in a lane. And if it's like that lane's not working, you're kind of stuck there. But I was just, you know, I was thinking about briefly, you know, because the thumbnail that I put on there it was mostly just a joke because, you know, like it's like, you know, I can't believe that he said that, because I say that a lot when we're having conversations, and because it's usually it's in a good way, because I'm like, whoa, that was really profound and amazing. And then there may or may not have been a couple of conversations where I push back and say, oh yeah, I said what I said, you know, because I'm like, yep, I said it and I said what I said. And but it also, that also again has produced some really good conversations. And I think this space where, Josh, the gap between the words that we say being very inadequate for the meaning we are trying to express in a way that creates this embodied closeness and this mutual understanding that is almost impossible to replicate in this kind of an arena, but that we need so badly, that maybe instead of, maybe if we say, you know, I can't believe he just said that, a little bit more in a way that's a curiosity to tell me more about that. And I said what I said really is just me reaching over and giving you a giant hug. Because what is going to speak more is me just getting past all of the confused jumble of words and missed meanings because of the confusion of the words. Cut straight through to the I appreciate you as my friend and my brother in Christ. So I'm just going to just cut through all that and just go straight and give you a big hug, because that's what I said right there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And as a useful practical takeaway from what we said so far, if you're in a conversation with somebody and you find it becoming disagreeable, zoom out.
Mm-hmm.
You might find yourself recognizing something different if you zoom out, right? Especially if it's something that's terribly personal to you or something you're really passionate about, or the person that you're talking to is really passionate about. Recognize their passion. Even admire them for it. Even if it's aimed at you right now and it's rather uncomfortable. Admire them for their passion. Point it out. I'm glad that you're passionate. That's beautiful. It's wonderful. I might think it's misaimed, but I think it's wonderful that you're passionate, and I honor that. Right? That changes the tone. It sets a difference in the way that you guys are going to engage with one another, because you're willing to engage with that person on a level that says you're more important than my correctness, right? And that allows for that. I don't know what you are getting a hug. That's it. Are you edified? You better be. You better
right.
be.
I said what
Yeah.
I said. That's right. So next time I see you, Josh, I said what I said. You're getting a hug, whether you want one or not.
Yes, that's awesome. Yes, exactly. But just be encouraged. Conversation's hard. You're going to be bad at it sometimes. It's okay. Keep trying, but don't be confused by the fact that your words are not enough. They won't be, and that's okay. I think that that's okay, especially because God made the affections for a reason. It's not just that you crave affirmation. You were made to need others. You are made to meet the need of others. That's not a bug. It's a feature.
And I think starting out with, because I will do this with people sometimes. I'm gonna start doing it more because it seems to help sometimes in conversations. I'll start with, I don't have words for the thing because it just doesn't have words. So I'm going to use the words I have to badly explain what I'm trying to say. So then it starts the conversation with, don't listen to what the words I'm saying, listen to what I'm trying to say behind this, because I can't put words on what I'm trying to say. So badly articulated, I'm going to explain it. And then we can try to dig down into what you're actually trying to tell me, if you give me a starting point that is badly articulated to begin with.
Right. Exactly.
All right, Josh, thank you so much for indulging my last minute, like, hey, I have this crazy idea. And I need to do something fun because I have been so stuck in thesis mode, and our certain Mr. Taskmaster over there has been like, and I got a couple people from my church who are like, get this done. You can't do anything but breathe and finish this thesis because you got to. So now that it's mostly done and I can actually take a breath, I'm like, I need to do something fun. And I have this great idea about talking about words are meaningless. And who better to talk to this about? This is just screaming for Joshua Davidson to come and talk to me about this with. So,
Bring on the wordiest dude. Bring on the wordiest dude. Yeah.
I love it. It's awesome though, because I get the best stuff. I get the best stuff. When you and I have conversations, they just turn out to be the best, especially the ones when you totally kick my butt. Those are even better. Because I'm like, I learned so much from those. Like I really want to have some time to just some downtime process some of these random things pinging around in my head and turn this into something that I hope is going to be a very epic conversation about, like, not listening to the words I say, but listen to what I'm trying to communicate to you. So thank you, Joshua Davidson, for indulging my craziness. And we're always happy to have you on because they always are, like I said, some of the best conversations that I have always involve you joining in on those. So, all right. So I think you've got something coming up that's posting up on Cosmic Corner soon, if I saw the short correctly.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, it's pre-recorded, and I'm going to be premiering it probably the coming Friday. This coming Friday. I think I'm going to be doing that. But I wanted it to be in a time, because it was pre-recorded, that I could be there for the premiere and be in the live chat and interact with folks anyway. Right. Because I don't want to, like, I don't want to miss that. But at the same time, I noticed something about myself that you pointed out. It's hard to watch the live chat while doing this. And 10 trains plus this, plus the live chats, 10 trains. I'm not that kind of conductor, y'all. I'm cured. I think I realized something about myself.
Well, there you go. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm hoping I'm hoping, no promises, because I have to turn this whole Leviathan thing in by Saturday, but I'm hoping to get back to a little bit more of a regular rhythm. And if I can get it nailed down, I've got a couple of friends coming to talk about garments of skin and what that is and what those mean and that those do, and some pretty cool stuff talking about that. Phil Bray is coming back, and we're going to finish our food conversation that we didn't get to finish. And we are also working on one with Master Garrett and Josh and Jalen, all in the same conversation, which is going to be amazing if we can actually get it scheduled. And it is going to be, so there'll be some good stuff coming out. Hopefully a little bit more regular, but no promises until I graduate, because I have to graduate. That would be really bad if I didn't at this point. So, all right, everybody, take it easy. Have a great one. And I will see you the next time I can actually put something together. All right. Go explore the story and try to figure out how to have a meaningful conversation with somebody that is sitting next to you next time you're somewhere else.